Hello, everybody. I'm here with Iskra Stamenkoska. Did I get that right, Iskra?
Yes.
Iskra is a teacher trainer. She's a CELTA trainer, and she works in the remote teaching program English Without Borders. And we are going to be talking about balancing student talking time and teacher talking time in this conversation. So, Iskra, why is it important to keep a balance between student talking time and teacher talking time?
Serena, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this interview. This is a really worthy topic. And as a teacher trainer, it's something that we address very often in teacher training. In the ELT classroom, it's important to find the right balance between teacher talk time and student talking time because it's immediately related to effective language learning. Teacher talk refers to the amount of time the teacher spends talking during a lesson. And this is inevitably part of our job as teachers, right? We set up tasks, we give instructions, we clarify language, and we often do this by explaining, but we also serve as a model for correct language. Now, on the other hand, excessive teacher talk means that there will be less practice time for the students. And when the teacher does most of the talking, this hinders the students' participation and their language development. So it's our ultimate goal to find that balance, to strike that balance between how much we talk and how much of our students talk in the classroom. And of course, this means creating an engaging classroom which is conducive to learning. Now, excessive teacher talk has a negative impact on the development of skills. It limits the students' opportunities for language practice and their interaction, and it inhibits the development of skills, especially listening skills. And studies show that it affects students' confidence in using English, which comes as no surprise because in many teaching contexts in the world, the classroom is the only time and only place that the student can practice the language. And when the lesson is dominated by the teacher, students disengage and they tend to switch off very often. And this is why we urge the teachers to take note of their teacher talk and how much they speak during the lesson, and obviously ultimately to find a way to reduce it. And the optimum time of teacher talk and extended student talking time is how language is learned. So we need to urge the students to actively engage in the lesson through pair work, through sharing opinions. We do this either in small groups or in open class. We encourage them to ask questions, to complete collaborative tasks, and so on. And during these tasks, the teacher is a helper, the teacher is a facilitator, often a prompter, and the teacher listens and guides, often listens and takes note of good examples of language and errors, which are later addressed during feedback and delayed feedback.
Thank you. So in remote teaching context, there seems to be a higher amount of teacher talking time than in face-to-face classrooms. Why do you think that is?
Well, online lessons are specific in many ways, and this certainly includes teacher talk. To start with, setting up tasks is longer in an online setting. It's either partly because of connection issues, so you need to repeat your instructions very often, and this alone increases your teacher talk if you have to repeat what the students have to do. Also, teachers often have the tendency to echo students' answers, and this is even more pronounced in an online class for some reason. Very often it's because teachers want to make sure that they have understood correctly the student's contribution. And with poor internet, that really is not an easy task to do. Sometimes it's very hard for the teacher to get the students to turn on their cameras during the lesson. And the teacher has very little control of the students' attention and engagement. This means slower feedback stages, and the teacher needs to prompt more, ask more questions, repeat the questions, and that obviously increases teacher talk. And we often assume that students don't understand because we can't rely on facial expression and body language, something that we take for granted when we teach face-to-face. But in an online classes, that's very often not accessible to us. So this is one of the reasons we tend to repeat again and again. So my tip would be here to trust your students and check understanding rather than just repeat and explain over and over again.
Great, thanks. Because that relates to my next question, which is, okay, what can we do about it? What strategies can teachers implement to reduce their teacher talking time and increase students' talking time?
Well, I'll share some that I find quite useful. One, and I'm sure that you've heard it very often, keep it simple, short and simple. Using simple sentences when setting up tasks is very important. They need to be clear, they need to be concise, because setting up as a stage should be short. So when I teach online, I always have the instructions on the slide, because that's the visual support that really helps my learner, especially those that have poor connection. I recommend demonstrating the task with an example in open class, so the students who can't hear can actually see when you do the task online with the one example. For example, if you have a gap fill or a sentence transformation, I recommend doing that first item with them in open class. So don't just show the example, but actually involve them in doing the first item together. And then obviously check instructions using equally same short questions and wait for the students to answer them. I often see teachers asking, basically answering their own instruction checking questions. My next tip is a no-brainer, obviously, include student-centered activities. I encourage you to incorporate these activities which mean pair work or group discussions or role plays. But it also extends to how we clarify language. Do you need to explain how and why and when we use the second conditional? Or you can get the students to figure out the rules. I recommend using a set of guiding questions, which the students can answer in pairs. This alone will help you basically cut your teacher talk in half, because the students will notice the aspects of the grammar or the function or the vocabulary, and then your job is only after the noticing stage to confirm their hypothesis, to help them answer the questions, and basically help them answer any further questions that they have. This is an excellent way to not just reduce your teacher talk, but also to promote critical thinking and learner autonomy in the classroom. I've noticed that guided discovery on its own works well with all age groups and can be applied even to lower levels. I know teachers are very hesitant to give elementary level students guided tasks, but learners love doing puzzles, and it's a very empowering experience even for an elementary level learner when they figure out that, this is how I use the third person singular present simple tense, for example. But for this to work, you need to have nice, well-scaffolded tasks, which have plenty of examples of the target language and clear and guiding questions that are easy for the students to answer, so they can't be very complicated. Something else that I want to point out would be giving students wait time, and that's a very common problem in the classroom. The teachers are often very, very afraid of that silence when they ask the question, and they are urged to give an answer to fill that silence. But it's very important to give that time for the students to, when you ask the question, it helps them formulate their responses, helps include everyone in the class. It's also important to resist that urge to fill that silence. Just because the students are silent doesn't mean that they don't understand. The wheels are turning. They just need time to come up with the answer. Also monitoring. This is something that's very important. I recommend active monitoring of the students' work, keeping a low profile, intervening only when necessary. Use prompts, reformulate your questions, encourage student-led discussions. When they speak, your teacher talk is automatically very, very low. And finally, my final tip would refer to how you respond to emerging language. Teachers often go through, basically, they often resort to correcting errors on their own in a teacher-centered way, in a teacher-centered classroom, where the teacher serves as the corrector. Basically, I recommend involving the students in the process. Give them the opportunity to self-correct or even use peer correction. So in a nutshell, those would be what 5 or 6 tips that I recommend as a way to reduce teacher talk.
Very useful one. Thank you very much. And so in connection with this, in your experience observing remote classes, have you seen, can you share any examples of good practices that you've observed in connection with this?
Of course. Well, I have to say that as a teacher, I too am prone to high teacher talk at times. So I spend copious amount of time trying to reduce it and finding strategies to reduce teacher talk. My first positive example is eliciting instructions from my students. With more able students and more proficient levels, more advanced levels, I try to do this very often. Let's say it's a gap fill task or a matching task. My students have done this many, many times before. Do I need to tell them what they have to do? No, I just show them the task and I ask them, what do you think you need to do here? What do you think you need to, how do you think you need to complete this task? And then I let them guess what the task is, let them set the instructions. My job afterwards is to confirm their answers and again, show the instructions on the slide and still demonstrate with the first item. So even tweaks like this, small things really help with reducing teacher talk and engaging students. Another good practice that I've noticed in my classroom is giving students a choice. For example, this week we're working on the topic of Christmas and how it's celebrated around the world. And I've asked students to describe how they celebrate Christmas with their family. So I give them a choice how they want to respond to this task. They can either make a poster and a presentation for us with lots of pictures and some text, or they can write a blog post, or they can record a video of themselves describing the event, something like a vlog. In any case, when the students have a choice, they're very likely to participate. So they choose whatever they feel more comfortable with. And lastly, my last tip is students' presentations. Flipped classroom is not easy to achieve, but with little tweaking, you can even use it in the language classroom. Basically, the students work on their presentations at home and they deliver them in class. For example, when teaching vocabulary related to food, I ask my students to go to the market and take various photos of fruit and vegetables sold on the market, and then they present their collection in class. After their presentation, which basically serves like a text for me, I select the items that I want to teach and then highlight the pronunciation and the form, and I check the meaning that they understand. So it's a process that's very authentic and very meaningful because it reduces my talk, but it includes personalization. For them, it's quite authentic because it involves some creativity as well. And it does help me reduce my teacher talk because of the language that comes. It's the language that comes from them, not from me, in essence.
Thank you so much for all those valuable tips, Iskra. Is there anything else that you'd like to comment on this subject?
Yes, I would like to stress that when we talk about teacher talk, we need to factor in the levels we're teaching. Basically, when we take into account the nature of the communicative classroom with beginner and elementary levels, the teachers should be aware of the quality of their teacher talk and how it's used, rather than trying to reduce it to a bare minimum. Because with beginner levels, we need to be realistic exactly how much we can achieve and how much we can expect from them in terms of language production. With these lower levels, teacher talk is a very important factor in the language classroom because the language used by the teacher is not only how they learn the language, but it's also the goal of language learning in all.
Yes, certainly. All right, well, thank you very much for agreeing to being here with us today.
Thank you, Serana. It was a pleasure. And keep working on reducing teacher talk. That's my last message.